Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Mike. I'm a futurist. I just like looking at change. And futurist is anybody who gets up in front of a group of people who waves their hands and talks about the future. Okay. So you have to decide if this is entertainment or if this is real information that is actionable to you. And the only way you can figure that out is to take the stories I'm going to tell today and critique them with a cognitively diverse group of people. Okay? Now I'm going to talk about something I call fundamental forces, which is kind of this accelerating cauldron of change that we're stuck in today. It's bright, it's scary, and it's definitely pushing us to a different place than we were in before. How many people have heard of Tom Friedman? Okay. His latest book, Thank You for Being Late, subtitle is An Optimist's Guide to Thriving in an Age of Accelerating Change. He talks about the supernova of 2008, the iPhone, and how different the world has been for the last 11 years, right? The before and the after. And that's what happens today, is there's a before and an after that happens that pushes us into a permanently new world. And there's a lot more of those kinds of iPhone-type changes coming, okay? So I have this book. If anyone wants to email me at this address here, I'll send a copy to you. It's my overview of the field of foresight. Now, what's foresight? Foresight is anything we do before strategy. If you do anything at all, collect trends, Delphis, scenarios, risk assessment, that's foresight. Okay. Customer insights, obviously, is one example of an input to strategy. So anything before strategy is foresight. Okay. I'm going to talk about what foresight is, about this accelerating change I just mentioned, and then hopefully spend most of our time on AI agents and kind of the implications of them for marketing. Okay. So what's foresight? Foresight is, like I said, anything we do before strategy. And like I said, all I'm doing is telling a Weeble story here. How many people know what a Weeble is or remember a Weeble? Yeah. So if you tell a story in your strategy team, make sure it's been well critiqued, because many of the future stories, people are going to knock them down. And if it's a Weeble, it's just going to get right back up. The data's going to keep supporting it. Okay. And so criticism is your best antidote to error. One thing you have to know about foresight is we're all trying to figure out RODA. This is kind of the key to my book here. Is risk, opportunity, disruption, advantage. Two concepts of foresight are what could or will harm or disrupt us. That's the defensive pessimism. And how do we best adapt and advance? That's strategic optimism. How many people would call themselves first defensive pessimists? That's the first thing you go to in your head. You think of things that might bite you. Hands up. Okay. How many people first go to strategic optimism in your head? Okay. So I would argue this group is not as cognitively diverse as it should be, because defensive pessimists live longer than strategic optimists like you and I, about 10% longer, because they go first to all the things that could bite them. And you have to be doing both in your head all the time, okay? Thinking about the risk and the disruption and the opportunity and advantage, okay? And Dan Kahneman says we go quickly and intuitively to the downside and then slowly and weakly to the upside. That's system 1 and system 2, behavioral psychology, okay? The other thing about foresight you have to realize is that there's what's going to happen whether you want it to or not, the probable, what could happen, the possible, and what we want to happen. That's the 3 Ps model. It turns out that this is very fundamental. There's actually physics that explores evolutionary possibilities that's unpredictable, like deterministic chaos. There's physics that takes chaos out of systems and gives us predictable future results, like classical mechanics. And then somehow those two kinds of physics created this, something that generates preferences, intelligence, life, values. So this 3 Ps is a very fundamental way of looking at the world, and that's called evolutionary development. Evolutionary processes explore possibilities. How many people think in terms of branches? You're just constantly branching out in your head. How many people do that? How many people think in terms of funnels? You're constantly like, yeah, chopping stuff out and saying, no, that's where it has to go. And how many people think in terms of landscapes? Looking at who else is on the peaks, who else is in the valleys, how I can buy the people up who are in the valleys at 5 cents on the dollar, or whatever I'm going to do, right, on the peak in the valleys, or compete or collaborate with people. Any landscape thinkers in here? Yeah, so that's the preferable. And this guy, a British psychologist, figured out he has this beautiful test you can take that will tell you on your team where you are. Do you have people who are innovator experimenters, people who are protector predictors, or people who are manager bridgers? Okay, you need all three to have a cognitively diverse team. Okay, this is the craziest slide in my brief. Evolutionary goals are about innovation and intelligence, exploring possibilities. Intelligence alone is dangerous. Developmental goals are about security, like your immune system, all the developmental genes that protect you, and sustainability, all the things that keep your life cycle going. Okay? The developmental genes create the predictability, the evolutionary genes explore the possibility. And then in the middle, we have empathy and ethics, connectedness, superorganisms like us, who could do way more if we have the right empathy and ethics than we could as individuals. That's collective intelligence. These seem to be the three fundamental drivers, I would argue, of complex systems. And notice we can attach some of the classical Greek and Eastern values to those goals. Okay? The other thing you should know about futurism is it's easy to mistake a clear view for a short distance, right? Like the whole flying car thing, right? And it turns out Ford wanted flying cars, 1927. So it looks like we're going to get them about 100 years after Ford first talked about them and built the Ford Flivver. And he wanted everyone to have one of these in their barn and roll it out. And just, you know. So we're not going to own them. They're going to be Uber-like devices, but we're going to have them, right? About 100 years after. Okay. The other thing you got to remember about Foresight is there's all kinds of hype cycles out there. There's all kinds of people trying to kind of capture the future first, get your money, sell you something that's not ready, and then it comes later, right? And this book, written by two Gartner analysts, is a great book to help you understand and manage hype cycles in technology, okay? And Kuznets curves is a very important concept in Foresight. And these slides, by the way, are available, so you don't need to write all this stuff down. A Kuznets curve is basically something that makes things worse before they get better. There's all kinds of examples. First-generation calculators made us dumb. First-generation video games made us asocial and focused us on things that weren't of much value, right? The kinds of games we played. First-generation phones made us more dangerous in the car. And first-generation income creates huge rich-poor divides. And that's the world we've been in today since '72, right? Huge rich-poor divides. So now we have this new problem. So much money, so much wealth. And people are being pushed out of jobs. Well, they're being pushed out of tasks. That's what McKinsey says. Not really jobs, but the tasks that we're being forced to learn is just faster and faster and faster, right? So basically, we have to steer this rocket of change. You know, we're here, we think change is going to keep going at this pace, but really, it's just going to go steeper and steeper. Okay? And this is my second weirdest slide in the deck, okay? This guy in 2001 figured out that complex systems intrinsically run their metabolism and their learning rate faster and faster and faster. The craziest thing he figured out was that suns, like our sun, has 1,000 times less energy density per matter or volume than something like a sunflower. Now, how is that possible? Our sun heats us from 8 million miles away. Well, it turns out it's this huge, big, fluffy cloud that isn't very complex. Complexity creates these incredible densities and speeds of acceleration to create value. In the case of a sun or a plant, it's metabolizing. In the case of us, we're thinking, right? And the weirdest thing is that our computers are about 7 orders of magnitude faster in terms of energy rate density than our brains, okay? And if you think that's weird, quantum computers are even weirder. There's something called Nevin's law, if you've heard of Moore's law. Nevin's law for quantum computing says it's 2 to 2 to the n. That's how fast they improve their ability to solve complex problems. Now we have 57 qubit quantum computers. that are at the edge of what's called quantum supremacy, which is becoming faster than classical computers at solving relevant problems. We're going to see that. You guys are going to see that over the next generation. You're going to see quantum computers become really, really useful. Okay? And if you ever played D&D in college, the two ways to think about what this is we're densifying, we're going into physical interspace, and that's where a lot of the incredible accelerations come, like Chason said, and we're dematerializing, which means we're swapping out bits for atoms. Sorry, swapping out atoms for bits. Right? We're pushing more and more actual data, higher and higher value in the data and the pattern recognition we're doing, and less value in the actual physical things. Okay? And that means we think more than we act. That's the other kind of dematerializing that's happening. Okay? So look at these rates of accelerating change. We started with 2 to 3% economic growth. And these things in the red are what technology is doing. Right? 60% of the world's data was created in the last 24 months. Every 5 years, there's 10 times more data. And wealth does the same thing, not quite as fast, but look, half of all economic wealth ever created in history, created in the last 20 years. And that's just a 3.7% growth rate, CAGR, right? The next doubling is going to be even shorter than 20 years. That's that rich-poor divide we talked about. So that's the rocket that we're riding, right? We have to figure out how to manage that. So what's obvious about this environment we're in, 10 years from now, there's going to be 81 times more searchable data, 50 times more persistent wireless bandwidth, 30 times more computing power per dollar, et cetera. Okay. We're shifting from just people to machines. We're shifting from just products and services to platforms, and we're shifting from the core to crowds. Something like this, which is a beautiful way, remesh, for quickly discovering the crowd's ranked, prioritized, power law distributed priorities on anything. It's like instant market research is a platform that's a collective intelligence tool. It pushes you to use the crowd rather than the individual, right? And become much smarter as a result. So what's different about the world we're in today is there's incredible openness, tools, and scale, right? These new technologies, these software technologies, they're just pushed out instantly. And this is where this is the unicorn world that that started around 2011, right? The other really interesting thing is the web's getting smart. Google's knowledge graph, which is that little thing you see when you say Thomas Jefferson, right? Not written by people, written by machines. Google ranks websites based on facts. You guys probably know that. So 3 or more factual inaccuracies, it gets a page rank punishment, right? And we're going from knowledge graph, which is what these systems can do today, to truthfulness, probability, and values graphs. And that's the really interesting thing, is the deep learning tools that you're going to hear some more about today, and the machine learning tools, but particularly the deep learning tools, they're kind of natural intelligence. Now, papers like this will show you that these tools actually mimic some of the features of sensory motor cortex. They can't do conditional logic yet. They can't do sequential compositional logic. They don't have any sense of emotion like we do. There's lots of things they're missing, but they are biologically inspired. They store their information smeared out in a set of associational networks, and they're moving to the kind of networks, they're called spiking neural networks, time-dependent neural networks, not just weighted neural networks. That's the next big move for deep learning towards more biologically inspired platforms, okay? And now we have companies like Nvidia with this hardware that we're plugging in, and we're just trying to figure out what can we do? What kind of patterns can we recognize with these things? How do we make these safe? Nobody codes them. We train them. We garden them. How do you make them safe? In the same way we made all of our domestic animals safe. I do a lot of consulting for the Navy and DARPA. This is DARPA's #1 model for how you make a drone or a robot safe, is proven past safe behavior, selecting these things for proven performance. And that's exactly what we did with every one of these domestic animals. We didn't design them either, right? We trained them, we gardened them. That's the world we're going into, and we don't seem to be able to get out of that box, okay? And now we have cloud, right? Any of you working on SaaS or cloud, you set up a cloud installation. It's not like the old, license and maintenance. Suddenly you can see what all your customers are doing. My gosh. Suddenly you realize that's the competitive advantage. Doesn't matter. Someone else could copy my product or service tomorrow. They don't have the insight I do into what's going on in this space. I can see it. I can see it all. And now I have this responsibility to use that data to actually unlock new value, right? It's scary, isn't it? But that's the world we're in. We're in this world where there's this very deep partnership on the data, okay? And so values really become important. We're in a world where by far the biggest amount of code base on the planet now is this something like GitHub, these huge public Facebooks for coders, right? Okay. Why did Google release all of their crown jewels of deep learning tools way back in 2016 and throw them up on GitHub for anybody to play with? Because there's 14 million coders up there and 35 million pieces of code, 3% of which are deep learning now. In the story that I'm telling you, that's going to be 6% in 3 or 4 years, and then 12%, right? That bottom up, that biologically inspired approach, that's one of these big supernovas that's coming, right? Because it manages complexity so much better than all the stuff that we code top down. Okay? So why did they release all those crown jewels? Because if they didn't do it, Facebook or Amazon or somebody else would have done it. And they all did it. Microsoft did it, but they did it like a year later. So Google's at the center of that. The deep learning development environment. I see some smiles in the room. Yeah, that was so smart, wasn't it? Openness, tools, and scale. That's the world we're in, right? So now we talk about some of the scary and different stuff, right? So we're in a world where we have these things like smart agents, and we're moving to something called a personal AI or a SIM or a digital twin. I like personal AI or PI. There's a bunch of names out there, intelligent virtual assistants, whatever. You want to call them whatever you want, but I like personal AI or PI. I think that's the best name currently. And what do these things do? Well, they're going to have maps of our values, our actions, our interests, and we're going to train them. We're going to train them this way, just talking to them or looking at their data and saying, this is the priority, not this, the way you'd use something like on Remesh where you would look at pairwise comparison ranking between two possible choices, right? We're going to continually train these to and we're going to start feeling like this is a personal extension of us. Weird, isn't it? That's really different. That's a really different world, okay? What are these things going to be able to do? Well, they're going to be kind of like a butler, like Karsten, or they'll be maybe like Andrew and Bicentennial Man. How many people saw that movie, Bicentennial Man? Excellent, great, yeah. Where the robot was earning money for them while they were sleeping. It's like, whoa, right? It's beautiful, right? And it's really, really interesting. You think of what your software can start doing for you as it gets smarter. I mean, run your Amazon store. It's going to be a lot of really interesting things people are going to do, and some specializations, right? Niches, okay? Solving people's pain points using these tools, right? And this digital twin. How many people would, if your kids asked you, leave behind your digital twin for your kids so they can continue talking to it while you're gone? How many people would do that currently? If your kids asked. Yeah, that's creepy, isn't it? Do you know how many people are really pissed off when Twitter turns off a deceased person's Twitter account or Facebook account? I mean, really pissed off today. They really are. That's the start, isn't it? That's the start of this world where you have this piece of you that lives on. How many people would let Google let the simulation of you get smarter every year? Continue to talk to all of your friends, create a kind of a more accurate version of mom. How many people would allow that to happen right now? Guys, some brave souls. Thank you. Yes, all the kids are going to jump into it, I guarantee you. And whatever bad things are going to happen, we'll figure those out too, won't we? Okay? So this human-machine partnership, that's the world we're in today. Sterling Anderson, beautiful, beautiful video on shared autonomy, Google's shared autonomy concept. You know what that is, right? Where the machine's constantly deciding what's safe, it's predicting what's safe, and what you're going to do. So it has to do both, which is twice as hard as, Google's approach, right? But that's the future. Think about the future of self-driving cars. It's going to be this level 3 type autonomy. That's what we're going to see a lot of, I would argue, the hard stuff in the next 10 years. It's basically protecting all the cyclists, all the pedestrians, right? You're still going to have to drive, you and I. The truckers are still going to have to drive at least another 10 years, maybe 15 years, right? We want to keep those jobs around. But the deaths are just going to go down, right? That's that win-win future that we can really see, okay? And then you have companies like League of Legends doing these human AI partnerships where the AI is finding flamers and trolls and then flagging that to humans, and the humans are setting the penalties because they discovered that if high-ranked players set the penalties for flaming or trolls, it's much more accepted than if the AI is punishing you. Does that make sense? So there's this deep partnership that's coming, and there's a lot of creativity in it. A company like Pullstring is doing the AI, the scripting, that works with the AI to build these chat bots, right? You have to have people creating these scripts, or they don't really feel, these bots don't really feel like they're natural, right? Okay, so users are going to want these personal filters and dashboards and data lockers. And we're going to negotiate with them over data and privacy. Jim Stern, founder of Digital Analytics Association, is one of the people that really gets this. He's got these 2 very nice books. Talks about the war, the ad blocker war that Facebook had in 2016 with ad block, and they lost, right? You can't win. I mean, you can spoof it, right? You can have something on your local machine that thinks that sends out information like it's reading the ad, but it's not. It's painting whatever you want over the top of the ad, right? You control that final interface. And that's going to get much more powerful. So in that world, the bazaar versus the walled garden. So today, it's top dollar to the platform, top down, one to many, and manufacturing desire. And in that world, it's highly personalized. It's value specific, the ads that are getting through. They're social, topical, and local. All 3 of those get through. And they're solving problems. Imagine a world 10 years from now where you can talk to anything as an agent for anything. All the top folks have that. Okay, they're actually working it. Would you want to buy anything where you can't complain to it? Where you can't, through your smartphone, say, this is not working. This piece is, instead of having to write the Amazon review, you just complain right to the thing, right? That gets routed to some crowd platform where everybody can see. Hopefully there's a good deal of transparency in it, otherwise it'll feel creepy. And you can see the ranks. This is the suckiness. This is the biggest suckiness of the product. This is a little bit less suckiness, and here's the little tiny suckinesses for different types of people. Right? In that kind of a world, we're going to allow a lot more things through that solve problems for us. And it's much more easier to see what the problems and the pain points are because you have those values maps. Okay? So today, Stern would say our analytics and marketing ROI are about things like money, satisfaction, and then persuasion, in that order, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce costs, raise revenue, increase customer satisfaction, and actually create, demand. In that graph world of 2025, 2030, we have the landscapes, right? That's a world where there's profiles for everything. We can educe what the customer interests and values are, like Remesh does. Educes what the interests are, right? Draws them out. That's the root for education, right? Draw out what your beliefs are. And everybody's got a reputation. That's a world where you can see what the reputations are. You can move to the places that have your similar values. You get even more polarization than you have today. Another problem we have to manage, right? So what I would say is find a problem that you need to solve, partner with somebody on a graph like this to make one of these things, Run an A/B test with your agents. Have various versions of these things, right? Great book on A/B testing. Make sure your agents validate and support the values of the community. Botsman's Who You Can Trust is a great book on the future of trust. Thank you. And I have these, in my slides, I have these examples of, there's a lot of chaos coming, right? Remember first season, Game of Thrones? Chaos can be a pit or a ladder. You got both choices ahead of you, my friends, okay? And I've got these 8, in my book, I've got these 8 different sectors where agents are coming. It's about 20 pages on it. You can just want to read just that section of what the agent world might look like. I talk about consumer goods and services agents, both the open source and the proprietary versions. I advise this company, NextIT, which makes agents bought by Verint recently. We're going to have education agents. People have talked about a global English where 300 million new common language virtual immigrants may come into work with our kids and work with you guys over the next 20 years, less than that, 17 years, because they're going to be learning English from agents on their smartphones, right? Okay. The language of global business, right? Then you have Her, great example of a movie that kind of gives you a sense of what the future of agents might be. Talk about social agents here. Wobot for cognitive behavioral self-therapy. People in the valley where I'm from use this right now to kind of talk themselves out of anxiety at 2 a.m. in the morning. Okay, and it works. Actually works for certain specific things. Right? You can just talk to these. They're still pretty dumb, these agents today. Right? You can still use them for useful things. And you've got things like CRM agents, health agents. Today we know that something like fasting reverses epigenetic aging. Imagine a world where you have that kind of data and your agent is telling you, hey, don't eat breakfast, push it off a little bit, and I'll show you the changes, right? You've got things like these transdermal sensors you stick in that tell you glucose. Ketones are coming next, right? Imagine your agent nudging you. Imagine where that's going to go. Right? Environmental agents, security agents, where we're top down and bottom up watching each other. Right? The agents for protecting our kids and for even finding, bad actors. There's so much of that stuff that's coming that's doable, deep learning doable, right? Okay, and as a consumer product, okay? Political agents, I'm going to end on this idea. What's the world? This is what kind of one of my favorite guys, Bjorn Lomborg, found out what the priorities for ordinary voters are. Thank you. What's the world going to be like when you have an agent that's advising you on how to vote, right? Or which candidate you want to nominate? That's a very different world. Okay. And are we going to have a conditional basic income? Not a universal one, but a conditional one. Right? This is a really good book by Brian Avent from The Economist magazine, a magazine I strongly recommend for that overview of how the world's going, and where that might, what that might look like. And I have this series on Medium. If you want more on personal AIs, if you don't want to go through my whole 20 pages in my book. So my takeaway is these personal AIs are going to be a powerful new source of empowerment, data, and ROI, and I hope we can learn to use them well for everyone's benefit. Thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Sure. Yes?
I saw a bullet point that said surveillance versus surveillance.
Thank you.
I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, so this gentleman, as a futurist, you try and find the what are called the Sentinels, or the bellwether nodes, right? Somebody usually sees something early on and sees it very clearly. And this guy in '98 saw this world that democratic societies, to be comfortable with accelerating transparency, have to believe there's 20 times more bottom-up, us watching everybody else, including the powerful actors, than top-down transparency. And bottom-up transparency is called surveillance. So all these tools that we have, all these cameras, like I just installed the Arlo camera, right? The Netgear's home security. It took me 15 minutes to set them up, magnetic. Every 4 months I have to charge them. I just threw them outside the house. And the coolest thing about them, of course, was just the cloud service, right? Last 7 days of data forever. I don't have to pay ever for that, right? Last 7 days of video data up in my cloud, right? No more $20 or $30 a month to some security service. Now it's just part of the platform, right? So that's an example of surveillance, right? This bottom up. And if we have more of that, we feel comfortable with a world where there's more top-down surveillance, right? That's his thesis, and you have to decide if you agree with that thesis. That's called the panopticon, by the way, the idea that we're all watching each other in a network-like environment. We can prevent the problems better. And as long as there's a lot more bottom-up, we're comfortable with that. You could make the same argument for guns, by the way, if there's anyone here in the room, the value, as long as we've got a lot more bottom-up ability to protect ourselves, we can prevent tyranny and keep liberty, et cetera. Okay. That's a fundamental idea that people talk about in the transparency space. Any other questions? Okay, so I have my email, and if I can help out in any way, and you guys have a wonderful, wonderful career ahead of you. What an incredible time to be alive. So thank you.